Hello, it's Paul Driscoll here, aka The Drisk, and I thought it would be fun to continue the series looking at a deep dive into a magazine, and this time is Amiga Power issue 1. Now, I'm doing this partly because it's the 40-year anniversary of the Amiga, but this is such a special magazine for me. Now, I did already cover issue 0, which was given away free on Amiga format, but this was their first ever issue. And you can see immediately how cool it is, just how bright and visual, their focus on the games. It was something that I was always drawn to. And of course, the first thing they mention is the cover disc, as you can see there. Let's take that off here. And it's Bomboozle, a really nice Anthony Crowther puzzle game. So really, really cool. And you can see some big names here like Chuck Rock and things like that appearing. So yeah, very, very exciting. As I mentioned, this came out in issue 1 in May 1991. So that's for the princely sum of £2.95. And yeah, really, really excited to go through this first issue. So you start off with a great double advert for upcoming Ocean games. As it turned out, they weren't that good, but you had a Narc, which is of course based on the Midway. Well, it was a so-so arcade game, but it was a fun little shooter. But so they're home port of that. Likewise, you had Chase HQ Special Criminal Investigation. So this is the Chase HQ 2. It was better than the first iteration on the Amiga, which was so embarrassing, particularly after things like the Spectrum blew it out the water. But the second one is not quite the same travesty, but still pretty poor, unfortunately. Then they have a Total Recall. This was, of course, based on the Arnie film of the same time. And yeah, it was another bit of a disaster for Ocean. Essentially, they had a developer working on it, team, and they didn't do anything. And then suddenly they had to throw the whole Ocean team of all parts on to making this game, and that's what they did. So consequently, it wasn't too bad, but it is very cookie cut. You can see that they rushed it out. Probably the best of the 4, but not by much, is RoboCop 2. And this was the sequel to the arcade classic. This is one that was just based on the film and was unique to the home ports. But you could see, the creaking of Ocean, although they did really improve themselves as the years progressed for their licensed games. Then we come on to their index of what they're going to be talking about, and it's got a massive section of tips based on the top 100 of the first issue. Reached out some huge names here we're going to be reviewing, like Dodds and Chuck Rock and Exile and Eye Holder. So PGA Golf Tour, the first game. So really, really cool. So very excited to keep diving through. Then you have the game that's given on the cover disc, and it is Bomboozle, which of course they went through on issue 0 quite a bit. And this is a really nice puzzle game. The idea is you play that little blue blob character, quite cute, and you control him wandering around the landscape and defusing the bombs. But the caveat is you have to defuse the bombs, or explode the bombs rather, in the correct order, because the smaller bombs will destroy the square that they're on. The bigger bombs will also destroy the adjacent. And of course you also get where it's chained. So a bomb will explode a bomb will explode a bomb. It's done by Anthony Crowther, who of course went on to do things like N2O and also went to work for Sumo Digital, doing things like the Sonic All-Star Racing and things like that. So really, really talented man. Of course, one of the founders of early developers on Gremlin. Probably needs no introduction to you guys and girls, but nevertheless, great, complete free game. And it's a real shame that they didn't continue with their promise of continually giving out free games, because that would have been the cherry on the cake However, as we have come to see, if I continue this series, they did always make sure there was like cream of the crop of public domain games in later iterations. Okay, so then we go to a lovely advert for the compilation, an Ocean compilation called Power Up. And it says, plug into this galaxy of fun and excitement for your computer. And this is really quite a cool collection because you've got, okay, we'll start with the bad ones. Alter Beast, which of course is the Sega arcade classic. It was a pretty so-so average port. Then you have the travesty that was Chase HQ. Not quite the US Gold Outrun travesty, but nevertheless it was a really poor conversion. Made even more so because the Spectrum did it so well. Then you had the really, really good games here. You've got Rainbow Islands, which of course made #1 in issue 0 of their first top 100. Check that video out as well. And Exile, and that's a great horizontal shooter. In fact, it's recently not been remastered, but a sort of sequel has come out this year in 2025. So it's kind of cool going back to the original there, and it's a great game. And then we get to the news section of True Stories, and starts off with Matt Bielby talking about Amiga Power, again promising that it's going to be fab and groovy, and they're going to review everything in full colour and not talk about pop stars and things like that. Then there's a nice little competition to win some remote control cars, Dirt Busters, for the upcoming game Moonshine Racer competition. And yeah, just was a pretty poor game, but nice to see there. Then they give a news that Arc Developments are working on the new Simpsons game. Of course, that was Simpsons versus the Space Mutants, and I think the Amiga is one of the best versions of that game. It's a lot easier to play than the NES original or the Master System. But the Arc Developments obviously did Dragon Breed conversion for the Amiga, so really, really good programming house. They then talk about an upcoming game, R-Type 2, coming out, and a game done by the same team that did Dragon Breed with Tim Round as programmer. That turned out to be a pretty good game as well. And then they talk about Ocean doing a home version of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which it was, there's some people who love it, but it was done by Dementia apparently, and they were the team, according to this, responsible for Core Designs Corporation, and more recently they did the home conversion of Golden Axe, which was very good for Virgin. So that's an upcoming game. So Terminator 2 had yet to be released. Gives you a sense of where we are in time. And then some sad news. Shirley, that's Paul Shirley, who had done Electric Dreams and Spin Dizzy Worlds on the Amiga, and ST, as he likes to point out, he basically decided to leave the Amiga. He decided to just go into Sega Mega Drive console conversions, and it's quite sad really, but that's the truth, is that the Amiga was rampant with piracy already, and it sent a lot of veterans away from the machine. And also, continuing sad news, John Phillips, that's John M. Phillips, author of Amiga Power all-time top 100 game Nebulous, as they say. He's also decided to leave the 16-bit, but he says he will be back. He never was, but he did. He's the guy that converted all the Bitmap Brother games on the Mega Drive. So if you played Speedball 2 and Gods and a few other ones, that's him. It also talks about a never-released game, sadly, a Scavenger that was put on the shopping room floor, and they show like a static image. It's a shame because it looks quite good. Then they have Interesting If True, and it says that Mirrorsoft have secured the license to bring Alien 3 to the home computer, although they're denying whether or not. And they're trying to work out how the hell they're going to do it, because of course there was only one Alien. It obviously turned out to be very good, the game, but of course Mirrorsoft would go tits up after this. Robert Maxwell had stolen all the pension money and apparently committed suicide by jumping off his yacht. I think he probably died. And of course, Maxwell, if you're thinking you know that name, that's his daughter, Delene Maxwell, is the one in the Epstein crisis. So, yeah. So there you go. Nice family. And then we talk on the other page of a new game by Sensible Software called Megalomania being made, and they give the tagline "Populous with laughs?" ? And yeah, I mean, of course, this turned out to be an amazing game, and we're looking to release in August this year from ImageWorks. Of course, Megalomania, amazing game, although ImageWorks being Mirrorsoft, and in that time got caught up in the Robert Maxwell committing suicide and the company's all crumbling. So yeah, I mean, it's quite sad. It never probably got the sales that it deserved, certainly on the home computers, not just because of piracy, but because, you know, people hadn't had the chance to actually physically buy in a lot of cases. Then they mention about Encounter coming back to the Amiga, which is a really old 1983 game on the Atari XL. It's a pretty good conversion, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. As you can see here, it's pretty forgettable on its release, but this is their first mention of it. Yeah, then we come up to Alan Grant, who, of course, did famously the Judge Dredd and things like that. And they talk about his new upcoming game, which gets reviewed later, called Demoniac. And that's quite an interesting adventure game that passed me by. So I'm quite excited to sort of dive into that one. Then they give a little crib sheet. I love these. And it sort of summarizes a publisher or developer with a lot of the key facts. And this one is US Gold. And one of the things that's interesting is that it was, you know, it gives the address of where they were, which is 2-3 Holford Way, Holford, Birmingham, B6 7AX. And as somebody who lives in Birmingham, this is really, really kind of cool, because it's only just down, well, I say down the road. It's a quick drive away. It's near Star City, if people know Birmingham at all. So it's sort of not far neutrals that sort of way, because it's quite a rough area. But yeah, really, really cool to see where US Gold are. I have to make a note there. And they mention that, you know, it's formed in 1984 by Jeff and Anne Brown, and they did Centresoft as well, which of course, Centresoft is, don't know if they're still going actually, but certainly for years later, Centresoft was still a distributor doing lots of games. So that's kind of cool. You know, lots of recent games. Then they talk about, you know, some of the labels attached to them. And, you know, you've got Access, Delphine, Epix, Futura. The Kix budget label was them, Lucasfilm, Millennium, distribution only. And, you know, they'd had in the past done MicroProse, Origin, Rainbow Arts. So, you know, they were a big deal, US Gold. Really, really cool. And then it talks about their commercial successes like Gauntlet and the terrible Amiga port of Outrun, but of course they were popular on all the home ports, Raid Over Moscow and things like that. And their biggest failure they cite as World Cup Carnival. It was basically a re-release of a really old, pretty rubbish football game that they re-released again in 1986 to try and cash in on the World Cup. So a bit naughty, really. And yeah, I mean, when it comes to things to come, you know, it's quite exciting. You know, they were still doing the Europe distribution of Lucasfilm. So, you know, some of the games they're talking about is Cruise for a Corpse by Delphine and Secret of Monkey Island from Lucasfilm and Outrun Europa and, you know, the Godfather game coming out. So, you know, quite an exciting lineup. Then the next news story is Damocles 2 Double Trouble coming out. This, of course, was Mercenary 3 Damocles 2, with Damocles obviously being Mercenary 2. Bit of a confusing thing, but essentially it's Mercenary 3 coming out, and yeah, quite a big deal. Oh, this is fun. This is Rock Hard Quiz done by Gary Penn, just for the fun of it, no prizes. So I'm going to read them out and see how talented you guys are at and gals at working these out. In which Amiga conversion would you find two rock hard hero types called Paul and Vince? In which Amiga conversion would you find two rock-hard heroes called Ben and Andy? Number 3. In which Amiga conversion would you find two rock-hard hero types called Hitman and Max Force? Wow, these are tough. And 4. In which forthcoming Amiga conversion would you find two rock-hard hero types called Mobo and Robo? It's probably the only one I will know. Thankfully, they will give us the answer when we get to, I think it's page 18, so we'll see. And just for variety, what Amiga conversion would you find two sickeningly cute sweethearts called Betty and Patty? That's the bonus question. So we'll see when we get to that page. One of the things they did, which I always loved, they did an Oh Dear, which was basically lambasting terrible quality games that had been released in the past and, calling them out for what they are. And this one, number 1, is Street Hockey by Gonzo Games. This was pretty dire. It was hockey on the street, which sounds quite good. But they say, no, it's a promising idea, but crap is far too bland a word to describe its breathtaking awfulness. The monumentally dire graphics were the least of its problem. Indistinct and jerky though they were, the mind-bogglingly hopeless sound was a scratch on a shotgun wound, and the epidemic of bugs such as the goals being scored during the half-time break didn't so much spoil the game as provide some light relief. No, the real problem was its playability. It simply didn't have any. Players skated around at random, fell down at random, hit a puck at random, and lurched randomly into walls as the computer switched the player you controlled, pretty much at random. After about 3 seconds of play, the featureless pitch made it impossible to tell which way you were facing. Not that it really mattered, as it was impossible to tell where the puck was anyway, or where any of your players were, or why you were still playing this scarcely believable excuse for a full-price computer game. Utterly abysmal. I can tell that's Stuart Campbell that wrote that, I'm pretty sure. It's scathing, and deservedly so. Other news stories, they mentioned how Powerdrome author Michael Powell was working on a cyberfight game, a sort of sexy 3D fighter with robots. Never got released. It's another one that ended up on the cutting room floor. Then you have Exterminator Arcade being converted, and he was coming out with a sequel. I don't remember that coming out, but I'll have a look. And, of course, then they mentioned they haven't got any letters, of course, because it's issue 1. But they then go on to Steve Screech. Where do you go after Kickoff and Kickoff 2? Because, of course, Steve Screech had worked with Dino Dini on the famous Kickoff games. And, they give news that he's working on a basketball game called Tip-Off, which I did buy. I was such a big fan of Kickoff, and I quite like the idea of basketball. It was so-so, but these are reviews down the line. Then you have about ZZKJ about to work on the fantastic Smash TV, which was quite exciting really, because these were the guys behind Super Hang-On, which is one of my favourite Amiga arcade ports, Power Drift, which was okay on the Amiga, and Super Monaco GP. So, these programmers were pretty cool. Then they mention 3D snooker, and this was Arch McLean working on a new snooker game in 3D to rival 3D pool, obviously. Of course, he'd made himself a name on IK+, and this game would be released with a license as Jimmy White's Whirlwind Snooker, so this is an early heads up. Then they give news that Head Over Heels, the John Rittman classic, is coming over to the Amiga. Of course, it was done by, I believe it was Colin Porch that did it. And, I know John Rittman isn't a fan. He felt the jumping was not quite right. But Colin Porch, it was well received on its release. We'll see it reviewed. And what's cool is Colin Porch is currently working on a sequel. I think he's released a sequel of Head Over Heels. So he sort of dusted it off. Then you have the Amiga Power Gallup charts. This is the official top 100 Amiga games. So it's quite cool. But I'll only mention some of them. You've got Lemmings at number 1, deservedly so. You know, this came out in February, but you know, by May it was still going strong. Amazing game, of course. Turrican 2 is number 2, thankfully. Really surprised I only gave it 3 stars, but because I think Turrican 2 is amazing. Number 3 is Speedball 2, another 5-star awesome game. Swiv at number 4, so great to see it do so well. I didn't realise Swiv did so well. And then you have Fantasy World Dizzy, which of course is Codemasters, and part of their budget range is $6.99 as it was on the Amiga. It was $1.99 on the 8-bits. And yeah, I mean, awesome. I love Fantasy World Dizzy, and it's really telling. They give mention at the side here that, you know, Codemasters have appeared like loads of times in this chart alone. 12 times in this top 100 chart. I mean, that's really impressive. But carrying on just with the top 10, number 6 is R-Type, another pretty solid arcade port. Then you have Final Whistle. This was an add-on to Kickoff. It really wasn't worth the money. At $12.99, it just gave you a few little tweaks and little things, not real major gameplay, just DLC really. But I guess it's testament that the popularity of Kickoff, that even though it was quite a miserly add-on disc DLC, people had still lapped it up and bought it. Then at number 8, you have Little Puff in Dragonland. Yeah, so-so Codemaster, but another Codemaster game. Then you have your Amiga dads coming in force with F-19 Stealth Fighter at number 9 and A-10 Tank Killer at number 10. They give mention as well that, you know, Powermonger is at number 26, and Mirrorsoft was doing quite well in they appearing 5 times in the top 100, and of course, you know, things like Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles and things like that. So yeah, pretty cool. Now we have page 14 and 15, we have the lovely double spread of the Special Reserve. I love these big colour spreads. And it does show you how reasonable a lot of games were on the Amiga very quickly after release. So, you know, you've got Shadow of the Beast, only $7.99. You've got Xenon 2, only $7.99. You know, some really, really cool games. And I love poring over all the games that they had for sale. But, you know, I mean, wow, to own all of these now in box would be so cool. But you can see they're already starting to advertise console stuff already. So, for example, the Nintendo Game Boy, $69.99, the Atari Lynx, $99.99, and of course the Sega Mega Drive at $189.99. And that really puts it in perspective of how tough it was really for the Amiga, and quite amazing how it brought traction. I mean, the Commodore Screen Gems, so the Amiga, that was the pack that I unfortunately bought, mostly for Back to the Future 2, but yeah, terrible packing really. It was £359.99. Now, I got more games with my collection than they show here, but just gives you a sense of how much more you were paying for an Amiga on top. But of course, once you did, through piracy and other means, it became a lot cheaper to play the games. And then they give a nice image of some of the joysticks you can buy. Continuing the news stories, they talk about Air Duel by MicroProse. That never ever got released on the Amiga, I believe. But yeah, it was great on the PC as you're seeing it here. And then really sad news. This was the month that Hewson was reported to go tits up. Of course, these are the people behind Paradroid 90 and Nebulous and things. Now, of course, Hewson went on to do 21st Century and do the pinball games. So they were still in the game, but yeah, very, very sad. And, you know, showing the initial creaking of the Amiga and the piracy. The core design mentioned they're coming up with a sort of Speedball and 3D type game with Simon Phipps being part of the design. This was a game that never was. It had Stephen Northcott, who did all those sort of Driller and Darkside games, working on it, but never came to fruition. I guess it wasn't very good, sadly. And then they mention how Domark is coming up with some home ports to Super Space Invaders 91 in the arcades, and, working on other things, and that Mirasoft is doing the home port of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Hero Turtles to bring the arcade version in the home, which was a so-so port. Then finally in the news you have Swiv. These are the Amiga Power recommends, and yeah, I love these because they always gave good recommendations of games to buy. So they recommended Swiv. Of course, that's an exceptional vertical shooter, brilliant unofficial sequel to Silkworm. They say it's Silkworm in vertical is what they stand for, but yeah, amazing game. I love Swiv, and I think far better on the Amiga over Mega Swiv and things that appeared on the consoles. Then they mentioned Prince of Persia, awesome game, of course. The rotoscoping of your character is huge and plays fantastically well. And I do think the Amiga version is probably the best version to play, where it keeps to the original. And then there's Speedball 2 they recommend. Needs no introduction. One of my favourite Amiga games of all time. Absolutely stunning. I love the futuristic sports game. There's so many different ways of scoring and nuance. It really is a exciting game to play. Finally, they recommend Lemmings, and they say not quite sure really what to say. This game is a phenomena. Lots of levels, lots of lemmings, tiny sprites wandering blindly across landscapes, riddled with danger, always perfectly happy if you don't stop them to plunge to their doom in game-losing numbers. It's like a cutesy platform game crossed with a God Sim, crossed with Roger Rabbit cartoon. Will anyone dare do a clone? Then it comes to a nice advert. This is by Mindscape, and their two games advertised is Blue Max, Aces of the Great War, which is a pretty good World War I flight simulator. I think it was surpassed, obviously, in a bit when Knights of the Sky came out, but at the time, this is probably the best one to play. It was always a bit more serious as well than some of the other subsequent ones that came out. And then the other one they advertise is Das Boot, German U-boat simulator. So you get to play a submarine in World War II, and it's quite a cool game, really. Now we come up to who the hell do we think we are? So these are the people that were in the original lineup for Amiga Power. So first of all, we have Matt Bielby as editor, and he did quite a bit on CMVG, and he was editor on Your Sinclair and did a lot. You'll find quite a few of these people did do Your Sinclair. And then you have Mark Ramshaw. He did things for the Amstrad and things like that. Then you have the infamous and wonderful Stuart Campbell, one of my favourite reviewers, biting wit and scathing in tone. I love his writing style. Well, the first time I really encountered him was on Your Sinclair. He was one of the greats that did a lot of top hundreds on the Your Sinclair as well. Sometimes went a little bit madcap where he would ask silly questions to people and things like that rather than what you wanted to learn, but it was, one of the greats, and it was awesome to see him come here. As Your Sinclair was my favourite 8-bit magazine, whereas lots of others went with Crash. Your Sinclair was my favourite. Then they mentioned Tim Smith. I don't really remember too much with him. Gary Penn, that's a big name because he was huge on the Zap 64 magazine and those sort of things. But very talented writer. Then you have Colin Campbell, tended to, football and things. Another one that I don't remember that well. Rich Pelley is one that I have a lot of time for as well. He also was another big name in Your Sinclair, and he did some on the Zero magazine, and great to see him there. He does great writing as well. Then Andy Ide, Again, I'm struggling to remember with Andy, but I'm sure we'll rediscover him together as we go through this series. Then Jonathan Davies, of course, the wonderful Jonathan Davies. He was another Your Sinclair, I believe, and he was so huge on the Amiga Power, probably the longest running Amiga Power person, and just one of the greats. Then Trevor Gilham, and he'd worked on things like Amiga Action and ST format and Amiga format and came across. And then Matthew Williams, which is another name that I struggle to remember a little bit about. And then actually we come to our final news item that they snuck in here, which is Braybrook was working, Andrew Braybrook was working on a new game called Fire and Ice. And of course, when that did get released, it was amazing. But, at the moment they were just saying that that's his next game he's currently working on. Then we get the answers to those quizzes. So let's see if we can remember them. So number 1 was, in which Amiga conversion would you find 2 rock-hard hero types called Paul and Vince? And the answer was Ikari Warriors. Then number 2, you had, in which Amiga conversion would you find 2 rock-hard hero types called Ben and Andy? And the answer was Crackdown. Then you have, which Amiga conversion would you find 2 rock-hard hero types called Hitman and Max Force? And the answer at number 3 was Narc. Then probably the only one I got, which was number 4, which was, in the forthcoming Amiga conversion, where would you find 2 rock-hard hero types called Mobo and Robo? And it does say, actually, this was quite an easy one, hence probably why the only one I got. But it is, of course, wonderful Bonanza Brothers. And just for variety, in which Amiga conversion would you find 2 sickeningly cute sweethearts called Betty and Patty? And I hope you got that one as well. It is, of course, Bubble. So then you get a nice advert where it's talking about the screen gems and how it comes with an extra 0.5 meg of RAM to upgrade. And then we come to our first review. And this is an interesting one to begin with Cybercon 3. And they say on the tagline, the people who brought you the sci-fi epic interface are back with more puzzles, more stunning solid 3D, and a computer that wants to control the world. Yeah, I mean, this was a really interesting game. I mean, it was done by US Gold as a publisher. It came out at £24.99 and was developed by the Assembly Line. And it really was a very impressive 3D game. It has you sort of like entering a computer and things like that. And I mean, it was always a little bit beyond me, and it still is a little bit today, but it plays interestingly well. I mean, it did an awful lot. Their sort of like ending tagline is, Cybercon 3 is state-of-the-art as far as games go. And even if you don't have much luck with the puzzles, there's plenty of fun to be had exploring the playing area and taking out the robots. The 3D is certainly some of the best we've seen, bright, colourful and smooth, and certainly manages to create a very convincing world inside your Amiga, which seems to be a lot more fun than the one outside it. Just be careful you don't get sucked into some kind of weird time warp and get trapped inside it. The real world might be less fun, but you don't get shot as much. And that was reviewed by Jonathan Davies, and he put on their final box out the uppers, the best solid 3D graphics yet, a huge playing area, hard puzzles and things to shoot. 2, plenty of variety and genuinely spooky sense of actually being there. His downers was takes a while to get to grips with the controls, sound on 512K machines, so that was the base model, not the upgraded model, has no sound, and for saving games it's a bit crap. Overall, the bottom line is a deeply serious, immensely playable and generally enormous 3D explore 'em up that's quite possibly the only game you'll ever need to buy this year. And then you have a lovely picture of the assembly line boys that worked on this game, and a rather stupid review by Stuart Campbell talking about, what is their favourite member of the Sugar Cubes group, which I didn't realise actually Bjork was part of. According to this, I don't know. But yeah, a bit of a wasted opportunity, but that's Stuart Campbell. He goes off the rails for fun. Then you've got a lovely advert for Chuck Rock, which does get reviewed in this episode, we know. So, this magazine issue. But yeah, awesome game. I will read what it says here. Chuck Rock's peaceful existence has been shattered by the kidnapping of his beautiful wife, Ophelia, by the evil Gary Gritter. In his quest to find her, Chuck kicks and belly butts his way through over 500 screens, played over 25 comical zones, and of exciting and addictive gameplay. So there you go. Now we come on to the second review, and this is Exile, done by Audiogenic, and cost £24.99. Programmers were Peter Irvin and William Reeve and Jeremy Smith. And, of course, they famously did Thrust. And Exile took things forward a bit. On their tagline, they say, "Don't turn the page. Beneath these decidedly average graphics lurks not only an enthralling game, but the nearest thing to an everyday life simulator yet. Audiogenic has reinvented the arcade adventure, and it works." So, Gary Penn really seems to have fallen in love with this. He mentions Exile even has educational potential. Learning from the textbooks can be dull at the best of times, but with a model such as this, you can actually go around. He's talking about how you can see sort of physics in action, I guess, and learn through enjoyment. Exile promotes experimentation without having to deal with a ho-hum series of windows or pull-down menus. But pretentious possibilities aside, Exile is a bit tasty and no mistake. It's entertaining. You won't get through it in a hurry. Apparently it takes the authors around 6 hours to play from beginning to end, and they know it inside out. So where does that leave the rest of us? Well, with a new sort of arcade adventure, better than the last one, and opening hundreds of possibilities for the future. The arcade adventure is dead. Long live Exile. That's what Gary Penn has to say. And his uppers is a massive playing area, packed with things to discover and do. Smashing sound effects and glorious control mode. With what makes Exile really special, though, is the way real-world physics and realistic creature behaviour have been implemented. His downers as well, let's face it, it's no oil painting. Occasionally you'll find it's not always that easy to figure out what to do as well, he mentions. His bottom line is, beyond being simply a very good game, Exile represents the future of arcade adventures. There's nothing quite like it available, though if there is any justice, there'll be loads in years to come. And he gave it 89% with that raving review. And I will say Matt Bielby, if there were other members that, vastly disagreed. Matt Bielby only said, on the other hand, he would have only given it 80%. And he feels that, with statements about, the future of education and the future of arcade and things, he thinks that Gary Penn's lost the plot, quite frankly. He says it's a good game, but, not as special as being said. They then give a little box out to the guys, Jeremy Smith and Peter Irwin. Of course, they famously did Thrust, as I mentioned, and it's kind of cool to see them here. Right, let's go on to the next game. Well, before we do, let's look at the lovely advert for Predator 2. He's in town with a few days to kill. Yeah, this was sort of like a pretty poor shoot 'em up, really, but it was kind of done from behind, and you got to see Arnie and shoot everything in sight. Yeah, I mean, it was fun enough, I guess, but by no means a classic. Then we come to the next game of the month, and my word, what a lineup, what an opening lineup of great games, because this one is Gods, published by Renegade, because, of course, Bitmap Brothers at this point had famously ditched their Mirrorsoft label just before it went tits up as well, luckily. And they had made their own publishing label called Renegade, working with Simeon and things from Bomb the Bass and that to do their own music and gaming publishing label. And yeah, of course, they would be very successful in the Amiga, doing many of the best games for Sensible Software and many others. But on to this was £25.53. Very strange pricing, isn't it? But that's what it was. And it was out now. And the tagline is Renegade's first release and the Bitmap's first since Speedball 2, has a lot of publicity and come backed by some big claims. It's got a lot to live up to, so does it? And yeah, I mean, the answer, spoiler alert, is it does, with Matt Bielby again going really over the top with his love of it, which this time I agree with, actually. I'm going to read out. He says, a game of nice touches. Having taken on board the ho-hum plot and unremarkable structure, it's quite hard to define, graphics aside, what it is that makes the game so nice. Mostly it's things that fall into that neat touch category. And since we're rapidly running out of space, here might be a time to detail some of what I mean. Neat touch number 1. The end-of-level baddies are all particularly impressive, even if they don't always seem to do very much. The first one you come across is a sort of giant centurion type, impressively large, as they all are, although all he really seems to do is walk backwards and forwards a bit. My favourite has to be the massive Minotaur that crops up later on, though. Nicely animated. He leaps about the screen and actually makes the entire image shake each time he crashes to the earth. Nice touch number 2. What apparently is background detail, gargoyles and such like, actually come to life and attack you as you walk past. Nice touch number 3. The shop sequences, quite how these became obligatory in the action games is beyond me, which work not unlike the ones in Xenon 2. Shields, lives, energy and abundance of weapons are all here. Nice touch number 4. The thieves who run about the place, totally oblivious to your good self, collecting treasure and such like. Being rather smaller than you are, and not to mention invulnerable to any of the traps, they can often collect keys and so on that you couldn't otherwise reach. If you see one, keep an eye on him, wait till he collects whatever he's after, then shoot him and pick up what he drops. It's a lot easier than getting it yourself. Nice touch number 5, your bird familiar, one of the best add-on weapons, who flies about your head and usually helps out with extra firepower. And then nice touch number 6, the artificial intelligence come player monitoring system. Check out the box out, I will go there in a bit. But he goes on and says, oh, in fact, let's go to that box out. What he talks about in the box out here is artificial intelligence and why you might not recognise it. And, you know, essentially they do things where the enemy patterns will sense how well you're playing, and if you're struggling a bit, they will get easier and things like that. So, nice ideas. I don't know how well it truly works. I mean, I've not really noticed it, but then it said I won't notice it on the box out. But apparently that's what it's all sort of like doing. So carrying on with what he says after the nice touches. So there we have it. Once again, a very professional and well thought out product from the Bitmap Brothers, and destined to be a minor, but only minor, I think, classic. I'd recommend anyone to buy it. So what's the problem? Well, there's a slight one. It's simply that the Bitmaps have upped the ante with their games enough that a very professional looking product is really the very least we've come to expect. It's a clever game and one of the best of its type, but it makes you wish for the day when they come up with one that will make everybody step back 3 paces and say, bloody hell, I wish I thought of that. Eric Bitmap argues that Speedball was pretty original, and perhaps he's right, although you could equally argue that just American football with a metallic graphics. Then again, you certainly can't deny they've changed genres with startling regularity. They may have broken little new ground, but equally they haven't been standing still. No, they've proved themselves great as the small innovations and rejigging of old concepts. That's what they haven't had, is that earth-shattering original idea. I wish the Bitmaps and Renegade success in their first release, but I wait the day when they could do something a little bit more unusual. And that was done by Matt Bielby. His uppers was lovely graphics, lots of action, nice judged puzzles, clearly intelligent baddies, lots of small innovations, and the normal gorgeous bitmap presentation. Downers, average subject matter, not as visually and orally stunning as Xenon 2, not as playable as Speedball 2. But bottom line, he says it's another excellent bitmap product, faultless for what it does, but wouldn't it be nice if they really seemed to be pushing themselves? Now, on the other hand, so he gave 87%. But Stuart Campbell, on the other hand, he says, I agree with most of what Matt says, but when it comes to marks, I think he's being a bit silly. If Gods wasn't by the bitmaps, people would see it for what it was. Well, what it is an average platform puzzler with outstanding graphics and great sound. As a game, it's slow and unexciting, and all the prettiness in the world can't save it. Clever though it may be, the artificial intelligence stuff doesn't really make any real difference to the way you play it either. It's still good fun, but very ordinary. And he only gives it 76% and notoriously grumpy. Then we get to their next game of the month, and that's Railroad Tycoon. And they say MicroProse enter the epic strategy game stakes with this title best described as SimCity. And a quote tagline by Stuart Campbell, if you like SimCity but found it a bit too fast moving, Railroad Tycoon is the game for you. Yeah, I mean, and basically that's what he says is that there's probably people, he says, there's probably people out there with the patience and placid nature to overcome such minor irritations. In fact, the average train spotter could well fall into this category, which means MicroProse have got everything sussed after all. But I'm not one of them. If you are and you like SimCity but found it a bit too fast moving, Railroad Tycoon is a game for you. But it's just that you have to be unemployed or the Duchess of York to have the time to get into it properly, and some kind of saint not to be driven out of your tree by the sloppiness of the programming while you're doing it. Very best of luck to you. Now, uppers, he says, utterly vast. You certainly get a lot of gain for your money. I'm sure it's very rewarding if you stick at it too. Downers, doesn't even register on the thrillometer, and the graphics and sound are primitive in a major way. His bottom line is huge program that will keep you playing for weeks, but that's partly because it's so slow it'll take you that long to just get anywhere. Very shabbily put together too, though good fun despite everything, and he gave it 79%. Matt Bielby says, on the other hand, he quite likes it. He says, Railroad Tycoon is one of those obsessive experiences. If it's the sort of game that will grab you, and I must admit, trains are hardly the sexiest subject matters, then the likelihood that you'll be very seriously grabbed. There are problems with it, of course. It's not half the game SimCity is, for instance, because it'll be so seriously inaccessible to the vast majority of people. But if you've got a lot of time in your hands, and if you like getting really embroiled and stuck into something, then if you're impressed by games that seem to have researched their subject matter and used it well, then it'd be one of the releases of the year for you. A genuinely adult game, not to say positively middle-aged, and for once I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. And he reckons it's worth 87%. Now we come to the next review, and it is Chuck Rock. Oh, I love this one. And this came out at £24.99. It's, of course, published by Core Design and programmed by Chris Long, Robert Churchill, and Lee Pullen. And the tagline that they write, dinosaurs, hairy elephants, saber-toothed tigers, Fred Flintstone meets the Mario Brothers in this Core's madcap mammoth platform adventure. Rock and roll. And this time it's Stuart Campbell reviewing, and let's see what he says. Where Chuck improves on Torvap is it actually has a decent game hidden underneath the graphics. Within the pretty basic platform format, it's packed to the brim with original features, well thought out gameplay and nice touches that make it a positive joy to sit down with. In fact, the phrase nice touch could have been invented for this game, with every new prehistoric obstacle bringing a smile to your face. There isn't nearly enough space to list everything I would like to mention here, but personal favourites include the way Chuck behaves underwater, the crocodile seesaws who spring you up to a higher platform if you stand on their tails and drop rocks on their heads, the obviously freezing to death baddies on the ice levels, the mud monsters, horribly scary, these ones, the cute little dinosaurs that split into two smaller ones when you bash them, and split again until they're so small they can get crushed between your toes. So there we have it. Not the most complicated game in the world, but decidedly neat one, put together with care and imagination. Remember, both Chris Long and Bob Churchill worked on Rick Dangerous 2, so you know the level of ambition to expect. And reaching the lofty peaks of playability only normally associated with the best Japanese arcade game, my only real niggle, and it is a slight one, would be that the difficulty level was perhaps pitched a little touch too low. A real surprise when you think it comes from the people who worked on Rick Dangerous 2. All the same, for a platform game that will keep you coming back again and again, you could do much worse than pick up a rock. And that was Stuart Campbell. His uppers was superb graphics and sound, imaginative gameplay and more neat touches than you can find in any 10 normal games. The downers, a bit on the easy side perhaps, getting sent all the way back to the start of a sub-level when you die can be frustrating. But his bottom line is supremely playable, a brilliant platform game, and together with great care and attention and a real feel for character. And he gave it 86%. Then you get a lovely double spread of Flames of Freedom advert for Midwinter 2. This, of course, sets it on a desert island this time, so a lot more variety to the landscape and really, really quite cool. I do love the sequel, of course, done by Mike Singleton, he of Lords of Midnight games. Then you get the next big review, which is PGA Golf. Yes, still a massive long-running series, but this was the first one that they released, Electronic Arts. And their tagline is, at last, a worthy successor to Leaderboard series. And joy, it isn't endorsed by some tedious old golfer either. And this was, of course, released for £24.99, published by Electronic Arts and programmed by Blue Sky Software. And it was reviewed by Rich Pelley, and he says, best golfing game to date? ? It sounds all pretty good, doesn't it? And more than pretty good, I'd say. It is, yes. Probably the best golfing game on the Amiga to date. Without a doubt, the best thing about it is it's such a joy to use. Everything you possibly need to know is given automatically when needed. So you can concentrate on playing your shots and still know what's going on. Even the most unknowledgeable golf person will be able to work out what to do. While the game offers enough realism to keep the experts happy, providing you didn't really throw the instruction manual away, that was just my little joke back at the beginning, you see, you can check out loads of information on the courses, find out the way that the pros would tackle certain problems in real life, and pick up hints on the best way to face any problem you might come across. Being easy to use and still fairly accurate is all very well, I hear you saying, but is it actually any fun to play? Well, yes, PGA is utterly addictive. Whether you're practicing on Seoul, playing a friendly with some pals, or completing the tournament, it's one of those games which will have you itching for just one more go before bedtime or whatever. The 72 different holes, 4 courses and times 18 would provide long-term entertainment too, I'd imagine, with a tournament keeping you playing and playing until you're actually good enough to win some money. In short, I'd say if you want a golf game for your Amiga, then this is the one to buy. It really is, for want of a slightly more original word, a corker. And his uppers is simple to use with just the difficulty level pitched just right, loads of holes to play, and all the features you'll ever need, even a cheat option. Nice graphics to cap it all. It really is rather addictive. His downers is, well, not particularly original, is it? There's no breathtaking, outstanding new feature here, which is perhaps a bit of a shame. The bottom line, though, is a jolly good golfing sim, which is not only easy to play and true to life, but rather scrumptiously playable too. And he gave it 88%. Then you have the Toki full-page advert. I love this home port and the arcade. I'm going to read out what the advert says. It says, "No ugly wart nose is going to make a monkey out of me." But that's just what The Witcher's done. 1 minute I'm the mighty Toki, and the next I'm having breakfast delousing my armpits. I can't walk a step without tripping over my knuckles, and oh, there's an overhanging vine. Time to swing out, sister. But my broken heart is going ape. My beloved Miho, I can't wait to share a banana with her, has been kidnapped, and somehow I've got to regain my manhood. Until then, I'm just swinging in the rain. The arcade sensation by Fabtech Incorporated is now available for your micro. Then we come to another big review with Armour-Geddon. This was, of course, published by Psygnosis and was £25.99 and programmed by Paul Hunter and Ed Seo. So, big names there. And Jim Bowers did the graphics, Lee Karras, Gary Corbett and Chris Wiley. And so this was a sort of like go anywhere, any vehicle type 3D flight sim affair. Very, very ambitious. And the tagline is, "A bit of strategy, a good dollop of flight sim, some easy to use controls, and a fair smattering of shooting. Could this be the recipe for a carrier command of the 90s? And then this was reviewed by Matt Bielby, and he goes on to say, in summary, he just sort of says that it's impressive 3D graphics, but it's a bit too complex to ever get your head round, really. But it's still very, very good if you stick with it. His uppers is fast and pretty 3D graphics, some fairly interesting missions, and a vast range of high-tech hardware to fly, drive, and track. His downers is lots of keyboard controls, takes some learning, and there seems to be a big gap between mucking about with it as a high-tech shoot-'em-up and actually getting around to taking a serious stab at the missions. His bottom line is, I can't see Armour-Geddon making anything like the impression of the encouraging the level of devotion that Carrier Command did. We've all seen a bit too much since then, but it's an excellent game in a very similar genre nevertheless. Then you get a lovely advert for Crystals of Arborea, a strategic role-playing challenge, and I completely forgot about this game. It does get reviewed later, and it's just nice seeing some of these adverts, of course, done by Silmarillus and such like. Then we get another game of review. I mean, these are top games, and this is Eye of the Beholder being reviewed, published by SSI and US Gold, of course, and developed by SSI. And the tagline is, just when Dungeon Master games seem to have got the FRP market cornered, SSI make a comeback and take the genre into the 90s. And then you get some quotes of, while never looking old-fashioned, it doesn't really push the game style far enough. And I've lost hours on this game, more so than anything I've played in ages. Of course, this was a good sort of like Dungeon Master clone, if you like. And in fact, they do a comparison between Eye of Beholder and Dungeon Master. They say, round one, the graphics. Visually, Eye of the Beholder wins hands down. The dungeons are more atmospheric, the icons prettier. The monsters are actually quite well animated. Dungeon Master does have the added attraction of clever lighting effects, i.e. things get progressively darker as torches run out, but that can actually work out more irritating than anything else. So Eye of the Beholder gets 8, Dungeon Master 6. Round 2, Atmosphere. Eye of the Beholder wins again, I'm afraid. Atmosphere can make or break a fantasy game, and decent sound is one of the most effective ways to help create it. Eye of the Beholder manages to grab you with the volume turned right down. So imagine how engrossing it is with sampled screams and so on. Oh dear, Dungeon Master seems to be lagging behind somewhat. They give Eye of the Beholder 9 and Dungeon Master 7. Round 3, design. Just when it has the best dungeon design is more of a subjective thing. Dungeon Master concentrates on pushing a lot of puzzles at you, making progress harder. Eye, on the other hand, offers a more spacious affair, giving the player plenty of room to roam about, hacking up the odd monster and so on. So depending on your preference, Eye of the Beholder was 7, Dungeon Master 7. So of course that makes the winner Eye of the Beholder at 24 and Dungeon Master lagging behind on 20. And so there we have it. Dungeon Master quite clearly suffers due to its age, comparative lack of atmosphere, and sacrifice of some of the fantasy elements in favour of more puzzles. Thus, Eye of the Beholder quite convincingly takes the role playing crown from the previous champion. But for how long? His uppers is at last a role player which makes decent use of the Amiga graphics and sound, dig those sampled screams, and comes with an intuitive control system to boot. It's so huge, truly a game to play for months and months to come. There's still life in the old dog yet. But the downers, a major factor explaining why this looks so good, is that so little has been done post-Dungeon Master to really push forward the fantasy role-playing concept. We want arcade-style 3D with full character interaction. We want it now. There's a price to pay for such an expansive game as well. Yes, it's 1 meg only time, I'm afraid. But the bottom line, not really as big a leap on from Dungeon Master as I would like, but still sufficiently different to make it a central purchase. Intelligent, and yes, that word again, atmospheric. It's a wonderful piece of software, no mistake. I love Eye of the Beholder. So it's great seeing the reviews there. Then there's a lovely advert of Gem X, the official home version, even though it was a home version. I mean, they used to pretend that these were like obscure Japanese games. It was part of their shtick. But it was actually done by German company. Of course, they did Apidia as well, doing the same things. Most famously had the music of Chris Hulsbeck, but yeah, they called themselves Keiko, making out that they were sort of like a Japanese developer. And it's quite a good little puzzle game, and we'll come to the review later. Then we get another review with The Killing Cloud by Imageworks, of course that's Microsoft, and was £24.99 and programmed by Vector Graphics. The tagline is, "The classic that wasn't. The Killing Cloud had the potential to be the best game in the mag. It's still technically superb, but lazy thinking screws the gameplay a treat." And that's what they say. So a box office flop. The Killing Cloud really is like one of those movies which has superb special effects, excellent ideas, great sequences, and a half-blind mule of a plot. It's like Batteries Not Included or The Black Hole, or hundreds of others we could probably mention. A good script writer would have knocked some sense into it for sure, but a better special effects setup would be hard to find. But there I go, griping again. In many ways it feels rather churlish of me to complain too much. After all, it's all too apparent that the plot writers did intend to create a solid, believable and atmospheric world, which to play out your role. The action is fast and furious, and the feel of the whole venture smacks of quality, although it's just a shame that the occasional illogicality lets it down. That's what Tim Smith had to say. Uppers, he says graphically it makes you sit back and say, my, that's jolly good, or it would if you had time. The 10 scenarios certainly allow you to hone your skills. It's not all brawn, there's brains too. But his downers are, it's illogical in the form of the detailed plot, just does not hack it. The interrogation scenes are a little on the didn't I side. A better parser would have given it real style. You're not informed about the fact that you only have 10 pups and nets to last you throughout the game. Potentially a classic is the bottom line, though the illogicality lets it down. The characters and scenario can be built on, though. Watch out for Killing Cloud 2. Then we get a lovely advert for Armour-Geddon, White Sharks. This is a shooter that I completely forgot about, published by Dreamware. Take to the skies in this all-action arcade game for 1 or 2 players. White Sharks is packed with features, including simultaneous 2-player gameplay, near photographic graphics, high-quality music and effects, and completely unique weapon customizing screen. Quality music and effects that allows the players up to 37 million different weapon combinations. To succeed, each level and alien will require different tactics. And whilst the fast-paced action will keep the trigger finger on overtime, take the challenge in this shoot-'em-up with a difference. Bit over-egging the pudding there, but yeah, I mean, I was quite surprised with this one. I completely forgot about it. Then you get, of course, another advert for Gods, and, they give some quotes there. Are you bored of games that pose no real advantage? Mindless adversaries that can't fight back? Dumb nasties who just ask to be slaughtered? Gods is a complete departure, featuring revolutionary system of artificial intelligence. Your opponents react to your actions and interact with the environments. Perhaps guile will achieve more than brute strength. Your cunning, as well as your skill, with the fearsome array of weapons at your disposal, are then needed equally to overcome the enemy. Award-winning bitmap graphics and music by Nation 12 make this their most exciting game ever. And have you got what it takes to be a god? And it says it comes out on the Amiga, ST and PC. Then we've got a really cool section going through all the top 100 lists, but the cheats for all 100 games, or many that have cheats. And there's ones I completely forgot about. I mean, obviously Rainbow Islands, they do a big description with things. We'll come to that. SimCity, the cheat, the way if you press the caps lock key and type fund, you get a 10,000 bonus each time. I mean, I use that an awful lot. But yeah, just so many. Rick Dangerous, enter Pookie on the high score table, and now you'll be able to skip levels. Prince of Persia, say goodbye, press caps lock and L to skip rounds, but that only works up to level 4. And then, of course, the famous New Zealand story cheat, which was, well, I can't really say it without getting blocked, but it was basically mother effing Kiwi bastard would give you cheat in the game at different times. Then you go on lovely take control of the rainbow detailed, and this is really good, particularly if you want to master the game. There's an awful lot to learn here. One of the things I personally didn't know until reading this is that depending on where you kill the enemy is the colour of the gem that you receive. So you have to decide where to kill the enemy if you want to get those extra secret locations and worlds. And, it does tell you how to unlock those hidden bonus objects and worlds here. So really, really kind of cool. Just an interesting way of playing. But yeah, this is only part 1 as well. It only takes you up to Monster Island, but great feature. Then you get like an advert about Do the Simpsons. These were these like premium rate numbers that you're always tempted to phone, but you knew your parents would kill you. But they always had cool gifts like quad bike or signed things by Matt Groening. I don't know anybody who ever actually won anything on these things, but they were very enticing, really. And they always appeared in all these Amiga mags. Then you get another advert with Virgin Ledger games, like it was in issue 0. This has Scrabble Deluxe, Risk, Cluedo, Master Detective, Monopoly Deluxe, and Diplomacy. So, yeah, nice lineup. Then you're carrying on their Complete Control with the other games. So, there's just interesting ones that's worth diving in. One that I think is worth mentioning is Enter 750J on the high score table to become an altogether more formidable proposition on the road. And the reason they say that is because you get a machine gun. It was such a cool little cheat. And then they also mention on Lotus Spree Turbo, define the player names as Monster and 17 for especially rocky ride. Chortle, they say, so they don't tell you what that does. But yeah, just really, really cool. I love all these cheats. Yeah, that's quite a good one when we get to Kid Gloves, which came out. It says pause the game and type Rhiannon. Now F8 gives you loads of cash, F6 takes you to the shop, and F9 toggles your invulnerability. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, just lovely looking at these cheats, and particularly good because a lot of the WHD ones don't actually have the trainers on them, which is good, but also rather frustrating. It carries on. I mean, they're just really, really good ones. That's a good cheat. Type Bluesmobile to get 99 lives on Tycoon. That's a great little cheat. But that's probably the ones that... that's a good one as well. On Batman, on the title screen, type Jam. That's with 1, 2, 3, 4 M's. So Jam. And then you can skip levels with F10 and get to the cool driving section, which is what I always used to do. This is an interesting section. They say, which Amiga games do you really wish you'd written and why? So they talk to various people. They talk to Stephen Screech, designer of Kickoff with Dino Dini 1 and 2. His game that he wished he worked on was Dungeon Master. He thinks that they could have done a lot more with it, and he thinks it's a superb game. Jeff Crammond, the author of Sunk Car Racer and Sentinel, he says Pipe Mania. And the main reason he gives on this is that he says it looks like an easy game to write rather than taking years to write. He obviously was feeling a bit burned out. Andrew Wright, who's director of Virgin Games, he says Shadow of the Beast because it's sold loads. Paul Shirley, rather snottily, says, I don't really use my Amiga. Most of the time it doesn't even work, and if it does, it's not plugged in. Any programming I did was done on the ST. So, of course, he did Spin Dizzy Worlds and Quartz. Andy Beveridge from Assembly Line, he says Lemmings. You'll see that feature quite a bit. He says it's just fun and refreshingly different. So he loved it. David Jones of DMA Design and author of Lemmings, he says that F-18 Interceptor is the one that he wished he'd made because it's got the right balance of flying and combat, and he played it loads. Gary Bracey of Ocean, he says Populous because apart from it being very original in every sense, it was really playable, forging new frontiers in terms of computer entertainment, and enjoyed great commercial success. Jeff Brown, he says Knights of Crystallion, it was a gem and the most unusual program that I ever seen. The music was absolutely fantastic, and so was the game. It wasn't that successful, but it was an excellent product all the same, and I'm surprised it took an author a couple of years to write. Steve Kelly of the Bitmap Brothers fame, he says Dungeon Master. It kept us addicted for weeks and weeks. It's big, well-designed, and easy to get into. The learning curve is perfect, and you just got that right balance of fighting and puzzle solving. We got a lot of respect for FTL. Then you have Joe Bonnar, producer of Probe. He says Turrican, it's just really, really good and got lots of really good things in it. There's lots of really good effects and interesting things to find and do. And it's got really, really good weapons and goes around you that goes wang. Then you got John Phillips, of course he did Nebulous and Eliminator, and he says Populous, there's really original stuff in it, and actually it wasn't totally original. It managed to draw other ideas without copying them, none of which spring to mind. He couldn't think what it copied from. Then you have Ian Hetherington, who of course founded Psygnosis, and he says Dungeon Master because it took the longest time to hack and therefore had the longest shelf life. So thinking with a business head, that's why people took the time to hack it. Simon Phipps, meanwhile, from Core Design, he says Rainbow Islands. It's a near perfect conversion. The gameplay is smashing and the graphics are spot on. It's definitely one of the best conversions ever seen. Overall, a top product, and best of all, it eventually got out. Now, Andrew Braybrook, meanwhile, who of course did the Rainbow Islands, he says the one that he wished he worked on was Tycoon. It's the first game I've seen on the Amiga that's technically very competent and very, very playable with lots of moving objects on the screen. It's also the first Amiga game that made me want to finish, and it made me feel I could. Then you have Mark Cale, director of System 3. He says Lemmings because there's so much playability in it. Then Peter Molyneux, who of course did Populous, he says Dungeon Master. I think it was the first role-playing game to break the mould of just being a clone of Ultima or Wizardry. FTL threw away the interface stuff and made it easier and more enjoyable for people to play. It did such a good job. There have been so many clones since, but nobody has come up to their standards simply because it's hard to conceive of a better designed interface. Captive, which no one could deny is a Dungeon Master clone, isn't as well crafted. And underneath that interface, you got a really good role-playing game, which is really good puzzles. The reason I mark all that is because it would be easy to stop after the interface. But what makes it really great is the combination of all those elements. They spent months and months getting the balance right and that takes a lot of courage or money to do that. And then you have Jez Sands of Argonaut. Of course, Argonaut famously went on to do all the technical stuff for Star Fox for Nintendo, and Jez Sands was a big part of that. And he says Lemmings is the one he wished he would do. It's addictive and simple and cute and has all the properties of a good game. I'm sure it will make money. Then you have Bruce Jordan asking on behalf of Paul Wokes, he of Mercenary and Damocles fame. And he says, Paul Wokes, this is, Marble Madness is a simple idea that's very well executed. It's the only one he played for some time, he says. Then you have Anthony Crowther. He says Populous, not just because it's a brilliant game, but because if I'd done it, I'd have more features like monsters that did weird and wonderful things. It does get a bit bland playing with all those soldiers. It'd been nice to have been able to do a few more things. He, of course, did Captive for this time, but went on to do lots of stuff. Mike Singleton, he of Lords of Midnight fame, who works for Maelstrom, he says Lemmings. I'd love to have written it because it's such a clever game. I really like the way it actually works. It's the fact that you have indirect control rather than direct, and set off all sorts of chain reactions. It's cute too. Now, Tony Beckworth, project manager Mirasoft, says Rocket Ranger, all the games in it are really simple, but they fit together well. He's obviously trying to advertise their new budget label of it, of course. You can see the technicals heads and the business heads here. And then you have Herman Serrano of Weird Dreams fame. He says Dungeon Master. It's just wonderful. It's probably my favourite game of all time. I just love the atmosphere, really. It's the game that most drawn me into. Then you have Marc Dejean of managing director of Ocean France. Of course, Ocean France did Toki and Pang and things like that. And he says Lemmings. Last year, I had a similar idea for that style of game. Except it was a war with little soldiers. It was one army against another where you just give them a mission and they go away and do it. But Lemmings is so playable and intellectual and funny. Then you have Glyn Williams, author of Warhead. He says F-18 Interceptor. There wasn't really a lot to it and it wasn't particularly realistic, but it was very playable. And there was lots of nice features, the sound particularly impressive, and really gives a feeling of power and speed. Try running it with the sound off and you can really see how slow it is. And David Braben, of course, he wrote Elite and most recently at this time Virus. And he says Populous because it was original. And that's it. And then finally we come to the last few here. Then you come to Paul Walker of Arc Developments. And he says none. It hasn't been written yet. It doesn't wish to be on any other. And then finally you have Ian Oliver of Real Time saying Lemmings. It looks as though it was easy to write and it was great fun to play and will make a lot of money. So yeah, I just find it fascinating. Then we do get the final ones here. John Hare, orchestrating director of Sensible Software. And interestingly, he says Kickoff because it sold well and deserved to sell well, unlike certain other games which promise more than they deliver. And of course, John Hare would go on to design Sensible Soccer and make his own version of Kickoff. So it's interesting to see there. Tom Watson of Renegade fame, he did Speedball. When it came out, it was just completely wonderful. Nobody had played anything quite as good as it. I'd like to have had generated that level of enthusiasm with a product. And then finally, I think, unless I miss one out, is Arthur McLean, author of IK+, and he says, Lemmings, the attention to detail and cuteness of animation. I'd love to have captured that. So yeah, I just think that's a really fascinating to hear what all these other famous developers wish they and would work on games that they love. Then you get more adverts and the prices of blank discs. I mean, the fact there were so many blank discs and they're selling XCopy Professional just shows you how in your face all the piracy was on the Amiga, which was part of its problem. Then there's a fascinating interview with Renegade and the Bitmap brothers, and they explain how they sort of formed and why they formed, and they also say how it all began. And Tom Watson says slightly not quite right. He says Virgin, being maybe Mastertronic, but Virgin turned down their Speedball. They didn't really turn down Speedball. They turned down Real Tennis. They designed after, in fact, but I guess it makes better tagline. But they're saying how they want the rights and ownership to be with the developers and go by them and with them. It's a real shame Renegade didn't last beyond the Amiga. I would love to have seen Renegade as a publisher go from strength to strength, because they did so many good ideas with giving control to the developers as opposed to the publishers. They also give a little readout with Sean Griffiths of Magic Pockets fame, talking about his upcoming game he's working on of Magic Pockets. And then you also have with Steve Kelly talking excitedly about his Cadaver Levels disc, which of course was the payoff. So very exciting there as well. Then you got some work in progress of Birds of Prey, and yeah, this did eventually come out and was a bit over complex, but it was lovely how many sort of craft and planes you could fly in it. Really, really ambitious scope. Of course, done by Argonaut Software, who would make probably a bigger name for themselves doing all the stuff, all the clever stuff for the 3DFX chip and things like Star Fox. And there you can meet the Argonaut boys there, Jez Sands and people like that. So that's kind of cool. Then you get that advert of XCopy Professional. This was the tool that we all used to pirate all these games that we were seeing in these magazines. And it was an easy to use, wonderful tool. I don't know anybody who actually bought the XCopy Professional tool though, because you just got a pirate copy. So they sort of shot themselves in the foot, I guess. It was one of the first things to get hacked. But yeah, XCopy Pro was pretty cool. Then we get to even more game reviews. My word, they really do lots of game reviews. There's Bratz, part Lemmings, part Roger Rabbit. The cartoon sensation continues, I think it says, with the arrival of Microsoft's new baby Brat. And this was a weird one. You'd sort of like wander around. A bit like Lemmings, you put arrows down and stop signs and things. And you had to negotiate through picking up everything and making your way to the end. It was reviewed by Stuart Campbell. He says, the bottom line, beautifully programmed with lovely sound and graphics, Brat is utterly ruined by a colossal misjudgment of a character. If you identify with Nathan, he's the baby, then you're not the kind of person I want to meet down the pub on a Saturday night. In fact, I don't think you should even be allowed on the streets. 65%. And Matt Bielby is a bit more, saying, he thinks Stuart's being overly irritable about it, and, he thinks it was pretty good platform game, and he gives it 84%. He thinks it's much, much better. I'm probably somewhere in between. I think it's frustrating, but yeah, it's a nice idea, not quite that well implemented. Then you have Metal Masters by Infogrames at $25.99, and programmed by Chuam Dukao, and Metal Masters. And this didn't do very well in the reviews. It was reviewed by Matt Bielby. I only gave it 42%, and he says, hopelessly limited, old-fashioned and repetitive robot beat-em-up, lacking even the weird, off-the-wall qualities that have made so many French games such a hoot in the past. Much better is Psygnosis' game at $25.99 of Automino. Chemistry lessons can be fun. Don't believe it? Then let Psygnosis show you. And this is a great sort of like you connect up atoms to do the puzzle game and make your way through. It's a game reviewed by Stuart Campbell, not the greatest lover of puzzle games. He says, interesting and different, but not really compulsive. And at the end of the day, compulsiveness is the main criterion for puzzle games. Buy GemX first and then think about Automino, he says. Gary Penn, meanwhile, gives it 85% on the other hand, and he says, I reckon it does have that elusive magic, something that makes it great and doesn't rely on move retraction like other puzzles I can mention. Talking about GemX, I guess. Actually, if comparisons to GemX are in order, then I'd like to point out that Automino has thousands of levels compared to GemX's measly few hundred. That said, there are two quite different styles of puzzlers, and I happen to like both. Only Automino more so. Still, Stuart's wrong, I'm right, and that's all there is to it. Automino is at 85%, or if ever there was one. That's what Gary Penn had to say. A little bit poorer was Ski or Die at $25.99, programmed by Mike Abbott, Nana Chambers and Michael Kosaka, and this was reviewed by Andy Ide, and he says, fun, funny and particularly successful multi-event snow sports sim. Quite charming, but it has to be said, really, really very slight, and he only gave it 52%. Also bad was Domark's Skulls and Crossbones, came out on $24.99 and developed by Walking Circles, and this was 42%, and they said a third rate for a C64 game. It must take really clever programmers to make something from a coin-up move this slow. It's a real shame too, as pirates would certainly make an excellent subject matter for a scrolling hack-em-up. So they didn't like it. Much better was Back to the Future Part 3. We're going to review this game next month. So we did. And it says £24.99, done by Imageworks, and they give it 76%. I feel a bit ashamed of myself for it, but I really enjoyed this. Probably the second best movie licensed game ever, says Stuart Campbell. Of course, I had the famous sort of mini games, shooting and things. A little frustrating, but yeah, I can see that there's some fun. Likewise, Das Boot was reviewed at Mindscape game, £30.64. Quite an expensive game, and was developed by 360. And this was also reviewed by Stuart Campbell. He gave it 75%, saying, being objective as I can be, this is actually rather good. The best compromise between simulation and gameplay yet seen in this field. Not so good, however, was the clunker that was Moonshine Racers, done by Millennium, and was £24.99 and developed by Peak Star Software. And Stuart Campbell says, it's a clunker. Moonshine Racers is god-awful Outrun clone with slow, jerky, primitive graphics and gameplay more two-dimensional than a piece of tissue paper that's been run down by a steamroller. The road lurches around in a completely implausible manner, and the old alternating stripes to create the illusion of speed effect has rarely been so ineffectual, not to say nauseating. Don't waste your time with it, he says. And the bottom line is, the sound is pretty good throughout, though some actual sound effects would be nice. And to be honest, it's not quite as bad as Chase HQ. But then what is? And he, of course, means Chase HQ on the Amiga. There was a terrible port. Inexplainable, disc swapping, no gameplay, in a word, crap, and he gives it 40%. A game that I had completely forgotten about is The Famous Five, of course based on the Enid Blyton books. This was published by Enigma Variations and was £24.99 and programmed by Nick Byron, Colin Jordan and Michael Hanrahan. And yeah, I mean, it was a text adventure based on the Enid Blyton books. I do have a soft spot for the Enid Blyton. It was reviewed by Jonathan Davies, and he says very Blyton-esque puzzles to solve, and everything proceeds at a cracking pace, unless you've got an insurmountable aversion to Enid Blyton or adventure games, which, come to think of it, probably accounts for quite a few people. I strongly suggest that you pack some sandwiches in your satchel and cry tally-ho and jump right in there. And his bottom line is, it's hard to imagine a less fashionable subject for a computer game license, but the result is jolly enjoyable romped and adventure garnish sort of way. Now, Mark Ramshaw, he only gives it 60%, and Mark Ramshaw, on the other hand, he gives it 43%, and he says, there's another way to look at this. This game is a load of manky old rubbish, and it doesn't belong in this decade. But I wouldn't want to be the one to suggest it, of course. I think I'll leave you to make your own minds up. Then you get more adverts, and you get a sense of the mammoth Amiga 500 half a meg upgrade. Yes, for £29 for the price of a game, you could upgrade your machine. That was an essential thing because so many games around about this time was making use. I was lucky in that the Screen Gems pack that I had it already installed, the half meg upgrade, which was awesome. Even more reviews. You get the Crystals of Arborea, which of course saw that advert. It's done by Silmarilis and $24.99, and done by Louis-Marie and André Roquez and Michel Panot, and graphics by Jean-Christophe Charter, and was released in April 1991 in the tail end. And this was reviewed by Matt Bielby, and it was kind of like a Lords of Midnight, but not as good. Lords of Midnight Chaos Mike Singleton did on the Spectrum. Now, what he says here, he says some nicely drawn graphics, but just asks you to do the same sort of thing for hours on end. Dull, repetitive, and ultimately pretty pointless. He gives it 48%. Slightly better is Spirit of Excalibur, another game I completely forgot about. That's why I love going through these games, magazines, deep diving. This was published by Virgin and £24.99 and programmed by Synergistic Software, developer I completely forgot about. It's a medieval tale of chivalry and slow disk accessing, is what they say. And this was reviewed by Mark Ramshaw, and he says it's pretty, but unless you're prepared to make several cups of coffee while each sequence loads, forget it. So basically it's a strategy game, but it was very slow. It's a bit like playing it sort of reminds me a lot of Defender of the Crown. Then you get Demoniac. This one intrigues me because it was published by Palace Software. I completely forgot about this. Priced at $29.99, really expensive. But it was the fact that it was programmed by Chris Stargroom, Joe Walker, but with the story and text of Alan Grant. Now, Alan Grant did quite a bit of the Judge Dredd and 2000 AD. So, yeah, I'm still intrigued by this, even though Matt Bielby says it was pretty poor. He only gave it 57%. It's a text adventure, but with nice graphics. But he says it's clever plus, interesting text, and the odd nice graphic do go some way towards reinventing the text adventure. 1 meg only, he says. But yeah, I want to spend a bit more time with this because I do have a soft spot for the text adventure. Much better was Gem X. This was published by Demonware and programmed by T. Lampion and C. Hislick. And of course, the music was done by Chris Hulsbeck. Yeah, it's quite a chill sort of gem puzzle game. Yeah, briefly, the game presents you with a split screen, one half of which contains a pile of variously coloured gems, the other half which contains a pile of variously coloured gems. The idea is to make the pile on the left match exactly the pile on the right, making a simple transformation principle. Clicking the mouse or joystick on a particular gem will cause it to change colour by 2 steps in a given sequence. The 4 gems around it will also change, but only by 1 step in the transformation sequence. If a transformation sequence will cause the colour-ready gems to go beyond the last colour in the sequence, then it will rotate round to the original part. Yeah, I mean, it's quite an intriguing game, and Stuart Campbell absolutely loves it. I love the music. I find the game, it takes a while to get your head around it, but it is pretty good when you do. I still don't agree with this score. I think it's maybe in the 70s. He gives it 88%, and he says the most fun you'll ever have having your brain tortured, unless of course you really hate puzzle games, in which case it's a bit of a non-starter. Then you get a lovely Premier mail order with lots of more games and excitement to buy. Then you get another game review with The Power by Demonware, $24.99 and programmed by Johan Lipp. And I just remember particularly The Power, the fantastic, I've got The Power music on the title game. But it is just really sort of like matching up the blocks. Stuart Campbell says, beautifully done, but a tad awkward to play and seriously derivative. He only gives it 70%. Interestingly, this is one that I do enjoy sort of like diving in, and it is Narm. This is done by Colin Boswell and published by Domark. It was £24.99, also done by Matthew Stibe as well. And this is quite an in-depth sort of strategy game of the Narn War with a lot of history, well researched. You feel you're learning about the war as well, which is kind of cool. But ultimately, Jonathan Davies only gave it 69%. He says it's a well thought out and potentially challenging war game that's let down a bit on the technical side of things. Then you have a French game called Quadrille by Loracel and done by Najib Cheli, and this is a weird colouring game. It's sort of, I don't know, I quite like it, but Rich Pelley, meanwhile, didn't. He only gave it 52%, probably about right. It's an average puzzle game. I might have given it 68 or something like that. He says it's dull to look at, dull to play. Quadrille is one of the least appealing puzzle games about. For the same effect, get a friend, some graph paper, and 4 colour pens that see whether you can get £25 worth of fun out of it. Then, surprisingly, it's so tucked away for such a big game. It is Supercars 2, done by Gremlin, of course, and was £24.95, and done by Magnetic Fields. Yes, they of Lotus fame and many, many others. And Stuart Campbell reviews this, and he says he basically moans about the fact that it's frustrating to play. He does say, although it's very efficiently done and nicely presented, the changes they've made have actually emphasised the weak points of the game without adding very much. Oh dear, they say. And he says it's simply too frustrating to be addictive. Nice to look at, perhaps, but sadly inferior to the original game. He doesn't rate it. Yeah, I guess they put more focus on the sort of like the fighting bits and stuff like that, which is what he gets frustrated. Another duffer was International Ice Hockey. This was done by Impulse and $24.95, programmed by Gareth Briggs. And this was also reviewed by Stuart Campbell. And he says it's cheap and cheerful, except it's not cheap. You can buy Speedball 2 for the same price, and that makes it look like a very bad deal indeed. Yeah, it's a pretty poor ice hockey game. Slightly better is The Bard's Tale, although they only give it 67%. Done by Electronic Arts and £24.99 and programmed by Interplay Productions. And this was done by Mark Ramshaw, and he says overall it's no disgrace to the genre. But as they say in all the best school reports, they really must try harder. And I sort of get what he's saying. It's quite lazy. It's not extending anything. You've still got those little thumbnails and flat graphics of things and, tiny little window to move around in. But, Mark Ramshaw's, his bottom line is 67%, and he says it's a competent and highly playable role player in the classic tradition. What was excellent 5 years ago, however, is in serious need of an overhaul in 1991. So he's just saying really getting a bit old. Then you have Super Monaco GP, US Gold, £24.99. This was done by developing house ZZKJ. Of course, they more famously did the more successful Super Hang-On and less successful but still pretty good port of Power Drift. And so, it's a big deal to try and do this. Audacious is the word many people use to describe US Gold's attempt to convert the monster Sega coin-up Super Monaco GP in the home micros. They said it just couldn't be done. They said such a huge mass of detailed graphics couldn't be shunted around on the screen of a humble Amiga at anything like the required speed. And, in a funny kind of way, they were absolutely right, says Stuart Campbell. Yeah, he basically says, bottom line, he gives it 72%. He says it's fast and playable, but maddeningly difficult, and nothing like the coin-up. It's just a bit of a duff as a conversion, is what he says. Another game that I completely forgot about, but lovely to see here, is Warlock Avenger, The Avenger. It came out in $24.99 and programmed by John Gibbons and Eldritch the Cat. Apparently Warlock is the third game in the series. First was Druid, one of a long line Gauntlet clones out there, and the official Gauntlet license was generally the best received. But yeah, this is essentially a sequel, and Stuart Campbell says that what Warlock does pretty well. If you want a slightly slower paced version of Gauntlet, then fine. Here it is, and it'll provide plenty of short-term fun. At the end of the day, though, it amounts to nothing more than a marginal respray of a 5-year-old game, and as such, it's very hard to justify a £25 price tag. But he does say, in the bottom line, it's easy to play, but difficult to get very far into with the reloading sequences that are really actually longer than the game of which precedes them. A blast from the past that doesn't really cut it in today's market. It only gives it 65%. Then you have Chuck Yeager's Advanced Flight Trainer 2.0, another Electronic Arts game, £24.99. And they put the programmer as Eldritch the Cat. I don't know if that means that people don't want to admit to it. This lets you do everything from space shuttles to all different crafts to fly. It's like a serious version of what would be Pilot Wings, I guess you'd say, meets simulator. Mark Ramshaw, bottom line, he says, however, arguably one of the most flexible flight sims, packed with options and some fun scenarios. Unfortunately, though, the whole thing fails to inspire due to its decidedly unfriendly pace. And he only gives it 57%. Also is Viz reviewed this month. And Fanar, right, that's got the gratuitous Viz references out the way. Now is it any good, it says. Reviewed by Stuart Campbell, and it's published by Virgin, priced at $24.99 and programmed by Probe. And hyped as the biggest rip-off of them all, and coming complete with a promise that you'll never play a bigger load of crap, Viz, the game, clearly has a lot to live up to. Programmers Probe have got off to a good start by setting out to produce a game that's unashamedly not for sale for children, is packed to bursting with steaming great lumps of rude language, toilet humour. Thus we get some highly impressive graphic renditions of many of the comics, both popular characters and some deeply crap music slapped into a horizontally scrolling race game featuring Johnny Fartbants, Buster Gonad and Biffa Bacon. Your task is one of 3 to race through 5 areas of Folchester, the beach, the park, the disco, and so on, hindered by the entire Viz collection of characters, with the extraordinary exception of Billy the Fish. To improve your chances, you can utilise your own special gifts, Johnny Farts, Biffa Fights, and Buster bounces on his unfeasibly large testicles to clear obstacles or avoid particularly sticky patch, in quotes, but only a limited number of times per level. The number determined by how well you do in these couple of games. These are all nearly joystick waggler variety. Well, what did you expect? And feature events like biffer drinking or Buster bouncing. But what's that I hear you cry? Never mind all the knobby waffle. Is it any good? Well now, Viz the game is funny old kettle of a hat stands. It's very simple indeed, but well, actually there isn't a but. It's probably one of the shallowest games I've seen on a 16-bit computer. You run from left to right, you avoid baddies, and you fart occasionally. The game compensates for this lack of depth with a very high difficulty setting, which would be fine if it wasn't for the long wait between games. And of course, the irrelevant to understate things, just a touch of humour. This is generally well in keeping with the Viz style, especially the top tips. But you'll get a couple of problems transferring them to a computer game. One is that after you've seen all the jokes once, which doesn't take long, they aren't funny anymore. But the other is that works on a scrappy throwaway fanzine-style bog paper looks too calculating and out of place in this high-tech setting. All this probably makes the game sound completely crap. But Viz is actually the kind of thing that you'll find yourself coming back to simply because it's fun to play. It's an irritating kind of fun because how you do it in the race can depend on which lane you get put in the start. But it's fun nevertheless. And frankly, it's about there to say Viz the game is two-dimensional as its paper counterpart. And £25 seems like a lot of money to pay for something, a simple game featuring much the same jokes every time you play it. And well, yes, you're probably right. Stuart Campbell gave it 58%, and he said it's good fun and succeeds in capturing the comics field to a large degree, but it doesn't stop it being undemanding and overpriced. You'll enjoy it loads, well I did anyway, but you'll probably end up feeling cheated in the long term. You get more discs to buy, good prices, more public domain games there, and even more reviews. My word, we are rattling through. You got Blazing Thunder. These are the budget games now. This was done by High Tech in $6.99. And Stuart Campbell says it's a really dinky budget game and a must-buy for Atari fans, because of course this looks and plays very much like Atari Warriors. I think 75 is a pretty good amount. Likewise, Stuart Campbell reviews Carrier Command, which was an old game but released on the Mirror Image label, budget label of $9.99. And, Stuart Campbell loves this. Everything about Carrier Command is fab, and now it'll only cost you a tenner. I really shouldn't be having to tell you this. Get out there and buy it. And he says, are you still there on the bottom line? Get out there and buy it. He gives it 89%. And then you have the budget game CJ's Elephant Antics for £6.99 by Codemasters. And, Stuart Campbell again reviews this. And he says, there's nothing special, sure, but a long way from being totally crap too. It's, he says basically it's a competent platformer and pretty good, it was a pretty good port of the C64 version. 63%. Likewise, 3D Pool trying to get out before Arch McLean would have his way with his 3D snooker and pool games that he would do. Mirror Image released this old 3D pool game for $9.99 on the Mirror Image label. This was also reviewed by Stuart Campbell, and he says, if you like the idea of computer pool at an unmissable bargain, not everyone will, of course, it's worth a buy. He gave it 77%. And, it really was the best pool game up until Arch McLean had his way with Arch McLean's pool. Then you have the arcade port on the Kicks label for £7.99 for Forgotten Worlds. Andy Ida reviewed this one, and he says it's fairly enjoyable, though slightly dated arcade romp, which benefits from the two-player mode. And Yeah, I mean, this was much better on the Mega Drive, but yeah, it's a bit of fun, I guess, on the Amiga. Another budget label hit. This is Operation Wolf by the Hit Squad publishing label, which was Ocean's budget label. It was £7.99. And yeah, I mean, Matt Bielby reviewed this one and he says, you know exactly what you're getting here, and it's within its limits. It doesn't really put a foot wrong. And I must say that, I mean, I think the biggest problem is obviously using the mouse is quite cool. It's competent, but yeah, it's not doing anything particularly exciting. Much better is the mirror image version of Speedball at £9.99. And Stuart Campbell reviews this and he says that it's a fine game, but if you can afford it, find Speedball 2. It's worth the extra investment. And he's probably right there. I mean, Speedball is a fantastic game, but it is so much more limited to the original. Another mirror image release is £9.99 with Rocket Ranger. And yes, Stuart Campbell reviews this again, and he only gives it 68%. He says Rocket Ranger is nice to have, but not something you'll be in a hurry to spend a tenner on. Yeah, I mean, you know, the mini games are so-so, but great graphics. More disappointing was Daley Thompson's Olympic Challenge, done by the Hit Squad at $7.99. So that was Ocean's budget label. And Rich Pelley only gave it 55%. He says it's hopelessly old-fashioned, waggling gameplay. Even if it's the great man's face on the box, it won't help it sell. And yeah, I kind of get it. You know, whilst it's interesting if you love your joystick waggling, this is, you know, interesting to see the Amiga version, you know, perhaps because you played it on the 8-bits is probably where it's better known. Finally, on the mirror image, they were releasing quite a few here. There's Strike Force Harrier. This is a realistic sort of like flight sim. Stuart Campbell reviewed this and he says it's pretty fine, but at the price it's been rather out-evolved by FA18. Do take a look though. He gave it 64%. Then you have the Silica Systems showing off their different dot matrix printers. Brings back memories. I miss the dot matrix printers. And more adverts where, you know, you can buy discs super cheap. Then they have a competition where you could win all 100 games on their top 100 of issue 0. So obviously that competition's gone, but let's see if you can do it. Let's see how well we can do. The music to Xenon 2 is based on which theme from which low-budget movie? Yeah, I think I know that one. How is Leisure Suit Larry 3 subtitled? Yeah, I know that one. That appeared in issue 0. Shanghai is loosely based on what ancient Chinese game? Yeah, I think I know that one as well. Name 2 other games not necessarily on the Amiga by Laser Squad creator Julian Gollop. Yeah, I could do that with my eyes closed. What industry cult character wrote the introductory poem to Castle Master? Can't remember. So it failed on 5. Number 6, Rainbow Islands is a sequel to what game? Yeah, I know that one. Number 7, which flight sim might be hard to track down in your local computer shop? I don't know. What's the name of the Warhead creator Glyn Williams' soon-to-be completed new game? I'm sure that did mention in issue 0, but I can't, for the life of me, think what it is. What is the name of the programmer of Filebird's Quartz? Yes, I know him, the grumpy old sot that didn't like his Amiga. Captive is essentially a modern update of which game? Yeah, I know that one. So, yeah, probably with a bit of thinking, I could have possibly won 100 games worth £2,000. My word. What it would be nice to have those games today. Then there's a great indispensable game guide on the Amiga by Amiga Format, their screenplay book. I love reading through these. It was great. Thanks to Turnbull, one of our listeners, he managed to give me a scan of this because I had not really read this one. And it's good. It brought to mind the Tip Shop Dictionary of your Sinclair. So lovely seeing it here. And they did do 2 screenplay versions. Then you get even more adverts. Yeah, usual things. Interesting, the Treasure Island, use your voice to locate the treasure. So many of these like premium number things. Then they talk about next month, the fact they're going to do Kid Gloves, the complete game. And yeah, I adore that game. I was so excited when I got this game because I loved the look of the game, looking at it as a kid, and really loved playing it. And they try and encourage you to subscribe, mentioning that if you do, not only do you get like a cheaper deal, but you can choose one of 3 games. And my word, Gods, Speedball 2 and Lemmings. I mean, what a choice there. I don't know what I would go for. I'd probably go for Speedball 2, if I'm honest. But Lemmings, I don't know. The thing is, as a kid, I owned all 3 legitimately as well. So then you get to their games directory, the bottom line. Now, we will come back to that at the end of this long, super long episode. But I really want to do it properly. And, the idea of this deep dive is maybe not watch the whole thing in one way, but like a magazine, you can dip in and out of and just sort of watch and enjoy. But yeah, the bottom line was great. At the end of it, though, you have If I'd Known Then, and they interview Peter Molyneux, and he mentions the first game was a mail order business sim in the Rockstar Ate My Hamster mold. That was the first thing he made. And then he talks about his first release game was Fusion. Yeah, the management game, I think he didn't sell. He probably sold 1 copy, and that was to his mum. Then he did, of course, Fusion, which Bullfrog worked on. But, of course, he really made a name for himself with Populous. And then they famously did Flood. And this is the first game that Sean Cooper worked on, who was like a straight out of school graduate that Peter Molyneux took under his wing. And, of course, he went on, Sean Cooper, to do the Syndicate game. And then he mentions with Powermonger, although he does call out that he feels it's not as easy to play as Populous, and he sort of regrets that. But they talk about their future, and, he says there's data discs coming out, of course, and they're coming out with another game called Creation, which I presume was Populous 2 coming out. Oh no, Creation would have been, I think, is that theme park? I can't remember, but exciting games coming up. Then finally you have like a double page spread of Kickoff 2 and, talking about all the games and the fact the final whistle. And you can see, all the DLCs that you used to get, like Winning Tactics and Return to Europe and Giants of Europe and Super League. There were so many extras. And they also advertised Player Manager, which of course takes Kickoff with Management Sim. And then finally you have Navy SEALs, which, Navy SEALs was so movie license game, but, nice graphics. I just quite enjoy going back to it. It says, a brand new and quite sophisticated game style alongside the excellent Matthew Cannon. Sonic says a superlative graphics, detail in level 1 is phenomenal and ranks among the best I've seen. On the subject of presentation, I can't enthuse enough. The cartridges to put all full use of the presentation screens galore with instantaneous loads makes for superb momentum. It gives a real coin-up feel and shows what cartridges really can do. And Zap gave it 92%, but I presume that was for the Commodore, not the Amiga. Yeah, but anyway, that is this episode. But stick around because I can't let the bottom line go. So set to some amazing music. I am giving you the entire bottom line. This was like a summary of all the games. So look out for the next episode of Issue 2. Until next time, keep it retro.
Into the wonderful, into the wonderful, into the wonderful, into the wonderful. the wonderful. wonderful, into the wonderful.
afraid the two little boys aren't home at the moment, but if you'd like to leave a brief message and their telephone number, they will get back to you soon.
is the money.